Hello, my name is Jeannine Vegh, and I'm a licensed independent marriage and family therapist in the Columbus, Ohio area. I work with survivors of narcissistic abuse, and I also write about this on my blog called discerninggal.com. And with me today is...
I am Elizabeth Miller, and I am a licensed independent social worker in Westerville, Ohio. I too work with individuals who have been involved with narcissists, and I also work with narcissists directly.
And we are bringing this video series to you about narcissism to educate and enlighten you on what this topic is about. And we're going to open your eyes up through different segments along the way where we're going to be discussing different aspects of narcissists. And under each of our video segments, we're going to list our websites so that you can find out more about us. And I'm also going to be giving you a website for my blog and for a course that I teach on Udemy. So with episode 1, we're going to start with talking about what is narcissism. So I'll let you start out.
Okay. So narcissism. Let's do the simple definition first. Someone with narcissism is someone who has, let's say, an excessive interest in or admiration of himself.
Or herself.
So that is the simplest of definitions. If you are to look for a more clinical, comprehensive definition, we would have to refer to our diagnostic and statistical manual. And we're not going to do that today, but that's when we are talking about diagnosing somebody with narcissism. There are certain criteria that they have to meet in order to get that diagnosis.
And as a disclaimer, we do not diagnose people in the room. When I'm talking to survivors, I'm not calling their partners a narcissist. I'm saying it sounds like narcissistic traits. So just wanting to put that disclaimer out there. And I don't even diagnose if a person is in the room and I feel that they're a narcissist, because I don't work with narcissists, I don't think that really serves them. And I think what's more importantly to me is saying I'm not the right therapist for you, or I think this might help you with your marriage if you could do individual therapy. And then what I would do is refer them to somebody like you who would be able to work with them, but I just don't say that's the reason why.
Even with the fact that I do work with individuals that have been diagnosed with narcissism, it really is the clinician's decision whether to tell the client or not.
Yes.
Sometimes it is the right decision, it is beneficial, and other times it definitely is not. And I certainly have had people come in questioning whether they are a narcissist, but that usually is because they have been told by a spouse or someone they're involved with, you're a narcissist.
Oh.
So I have people come in who have said, please help me, am I? Often I've had people come in and say, I know I'm not, so I want to prove him or her wrong.
Okay.
So it really just depends on the person. It's highly specific whether I believe there's a diagnosis of narcissism, whether I tell the client.
Or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will have survivors come in and say, who've been survivors of parents, and they'll say, does this make me a narcissist because I grew up with them and I'm just like them? And so we talk about that, and generally they're not. But I do see times where and we'll talk about this more when we're talking about survivors of narcissists from parents, but what I'll see is just character traits that need to be differentiated from the parent, but it doesn't necessarily make them a narcissist because they still yell like their mom or something like that. So,
well, I think it's a good time to say what narcissism is not.
Exactly.
Right. Jeannine and I were talking about this before we started taping, and so we were discussing that differentiating between what are narcissistic traits versus what is healthy self-esteem. is important, right?
Yes.
So someone who is self-confident, that is not narcissism. Someone who is successful or at the top of their organization, that doesn't mean they are a narcissist. Positive, healthy self-regard is not a sign that someone is a narcissist.
Even having an ego doesn't
Even
make
having
you,
an ego.
we all have an ego.
Well, we need to, right? So
Exactly.
that we can move ourselves forward in the direction we want to go. We have to have positive, healthy regard for ourselves. Oh, and also I just wanted to add, someone who is an extrovert, or maybe the life of a party, is not a narcissist. They could be, they could not be. That character or that trait in and of itself does not mean someone is a narcissist.
And also, an introvert doesn't mean that they're a narcissist, because sometimes because the person isn't talking or isn't interacting with us because they have introverted qualities, that doesn't make them a narcissist.
No, there are certain characteristics that we look for.
So let's talk about that. What's the difference between having self-confidence versus being a narcissist? What does that look like?
Well, I think we can talk about what we've seen.
Okay.
There is no one size fits all to this.
That's a good comment.
Right?
Yeah.
There is no one size fits all. So someone who is highly energetic, highly self-promoting, grandiose, okay? Could be distasteful. Does that mean they're a narcissist? Maybe. How are they as far as empathy?
Yes.
Are they aware of other people? Are they dialed in to the impact of their behaviors on others? Do they care?
Yeah.
Right?
And can they have the self-awareness to step away, like if somebody is confronting them about something, to step away from it and say, okay, I see your point.
Right.
Looking at the bigger picture. And you're right, I did, taking responsibility. You're right, I did do that. So a self-confident person, they might showboat themselves and, yeah, I did it, and dance around the room, that kind of thing. But a narcissist would be more apt to take full credit for what's happening, and then the person that he or she is showboating themselves to is probably going to stand there and be thinking to themselves, well, weren't we on a team? And I thought it was my idea. I thought I brought this up. They're going to be thinking that. May not necessarily say that, depending on the role of that person saying it. If it's their boss, I've certainly had that happen before with a boss where, I came up with this brilliant idea and then they took full credit for it in front of a room. I'm not going to stand there and say, wait a minute, that was my idea, because who's going to listen to me? So that's self-confidence.
That's self-confidence.
That's kind of a differentiating between self-confidence versus a narcissist and how they might handle it.
Exactly. And it takes a relationship to learn if someone is a narcissist. I think we're too quick in the world today to see certain behaviors and say, that's a narcissist, that's a narcissist.
Yeah.
Even the best of us can have self-centered moments. That doesn't mean we're narcissistic, right? Typically when people start to realize that they might be dealing with a narcissistic boss or a narcissistic spouse, is after they've been in relationship with them for a while. So that's an important characteristic that you need to pay attention to. Narcissism, like all personality disorders, are patterns of behaviors. Okay, and personality disorders, by definition, are character structures that do not change over the course of time. Okay, so the longer you're with someone and you watch their behaviors, you start to realize this is a pattern. This is a pattern of interaction. This is a pattern of their internal structure, how they engage with themselves, how they engage with others. how they receive things. Are they highly defensive? Are they able to hear feedback? Are they able to hear criticism? Are, like you said a minute ago, are they able to have critical thinking, right? Are they able in the moment to say, well, I kind of want to defend myself here, but gosh, she's right?
Exactly. And being able to come back and say, you know, honey, I thought about that, and I think you made a good point there. I probably shouldn't have said it that way.
That's critical thinking.
Right.
That's being able to reflect upon your own behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So what about overt versus covert?
Yes. So there's two different types of narcissists, although you had brought up a third type as well. I can't remember what you called that.
In some of the research I've done and the work I do, some authors define it in overt, covert. There's also grandiose, and I forget what the other one is, vulnerable. Grandiose, vulnerable. And then some people researchers will say there is a standalone category of pathological, which is where you really get into the clinical diagnosis. But for our conversation, let's keep it to overt and covert. Yeah.
Okay, and so the overt is somebody where it's more obvious. This is the kind of person that people usually are referring to when they're talking about the boss or the big guy in the business or in the board or what have you. So it's the person that kind of is in a big role, and they're kind of fitting that definition that you might see if you were to read about it in the DSM-5, sorry. And
you've been at this too long. Referring to the 4. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. And then the covert is more what a lot of people will say, the shy introvert. So again, I said before, introvert doesn't mean they're a narcissist, but yet you might see an overt as being more extroverted, and you might see the covert as being more introverted. So you want to talk some more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've outlined it really well. The overt is typically what we think of. Typically when somebody's talking about a narcissist, that's what they're thinking of, the overt narcissist. Self-promoting, grandiose, bragging, really not even very aware of others, willing to hurt others to get what they want, and they don't really hide it very well. Covert, there's a lot more talk about covert, I think, now. People are coming to realize how significant of a category covert is. And so it's
more hidden.
It's more hidden.
And now it's coming out.
These individuals will come off as humble, self-deprecating, kind of sitting behind the scenes, willing to allow others to have the so-called spotlight. They can sometimes present with a lot of anxiety and self-criticism, which those who are involved with them are trying to bolster them. But again, if we think about narcissism from a relational standpoint, whether it's overt or covert, the narcissist is in relationship with someone to gain something for themselves, right? Positive regard, okay? Look at it in a simplistic way as they lack the ability to self-validate. So they are making an effort to gain validation, to gain positive regard from whether it's a partner or a coworker, because they lack the ability to do that, which seems counterintuitive because they can be very grandiose and very self-promoting. But that's really just a screen for what they really lack. Now, we won't get into the inner psyche of the narcissist today, but in relation, that's a covert would do that in a different way than an overt would, as far as gaining regard or attention from someone.
it's more coming from, oh, woe is me. And
Yes.
then the partner is validating by saying, oh, I would never do that to you. I love you too much. I couldn't think of doing something like that behavior.
The thing that's important about the two of them is that they are both forms of manipulation.
Yes. Different kinds, but both forms of manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas somebody who's self-confident, they're not trying to manipulate somebody. They're just having a good day and feeling great because they aced the test,
Right.
or because I got my license, or what have you.
Right.
And it's just, versus somebody, it's always, like, it's constantly, like you said, a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word I'm missing. It becomes a pattern versus just once in a while they are excited about their achievements.
Well, my clients will say often, if they are in relationship with people like this, or people they believe are narcissistic, that it is insatiable, that there's this need, this constant feeding that their partner needs, that
and it's never about them, about the partner who's not the narcissist, because the partner is constantly giving and giving and giving to help validate them, to help them to feel a certain way, but they're beginning to feel depleted as a partner. Like, when are my needs going to get met? When are we going to do what I want to do? When are we going to get to eat what I want to eat? That kind of thing.
Right. And often what you'll find, right, is once the partner of the narcissist starts to name some of their own needs,
Yes.
the narcissistic person will accuse them of being selfish.
Yes.
Right? So,
And we'll say, it's all about you, isn't
exactly. It's all about you, when nothing literally has been about them, or very little has been about them, which
Right.
can be a contrast from the beginning of the relationship with the narcissist. But we'll talk more about that when we get into things like love bombing and the valuing phase before they get to the devaluing phase.
Mm-hmm.
What I think would be good is to, since we're kind of talking hard data right now, is to talk about causes of narcissism.
Yes.
And we'll be very brief about this, because there is no hard and fast research study that shows the cause of narcissism. Okay, but there are 3 theories that I subscribe to. One being the aversive childhood experience theory, which includes poor attachment. The second one being the genetic theory, which is about inheritability. And the third one being the biopsychosocial theory, which combines the two. Combines the environmental experiences of childhood along with the possible link with genetics.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you want to expound on any of that or just kind of put them out there.
Well, I just want to say that when we're talking about genetic, I know a lot of people who are survivors of narcissistic parents, they're going to go back to that fear of, well, then doesn't that make me a narcissist? Because it's genetic. And, so I just want to put that out there.
So what I would say to that is what they're looking at primarily through twin studies is the impact of, or I should say the influence of genetics. Okay, it's not direct cause and effect. It's not predictive. Okay. It's just correlations through the twin studies.
Okay.
And they're looking for certain characteristics within narcissism, certain traits. Okay, so the grandiosity, the researchers studied that particular trait. So again, it is not predictive. So I don't want anyone to be concerned that, oh golly, my parents or my mother has narcissism or is a narcissist, therefore I will become one. Okay, it simply just is not the case. There's no way of knowing that. But there are things they are learning from the twin studies that do show some connections. So we'll leave it there. As we know more over the years,
we'll learn more.
We'll learn more.
We'll be talking about it more.
And there are a lot of great research studies that have been done, obviously, for many years, long before Jeannine and I started this work that have to do with what I think is the most common thought about what causes narcissism, which is about early childhood experience and attachment styles. So
it's a complicated topic, and I think the reason why we're doing this also is because there's just so much passion for this topic right now from so many people who've been hurt and wounded by these type of people, and so we're both coming from a place of having empathy for both the narcissist and the survivor, because we're therapists. I mean, we can't not feel something for our clients, whether even if they are a perpetrator. I mean, I know when I worked in social services and I was dealing with the perpetrator, I still felt empathy for them. I still knew that they were this kind of person because of the way they were raised, their environment, what have you. So I'm just wanting to kind of say that.
Exactly, and I think you bring up a very good point, that there's a body of work around narcissism or personality disorders in general being adaptations of the personality that were formed because of early childhood traumatic experiences, right? So if you think of it that way, it becomes a coping skill.
It
right?
does.
The child had to adapt their personality to fit the traumatic environment. So that provides a more empathetic stance on it. However, I think for the sake of our discussion, we're going to kind of stop that there, so that we do want to focus a lot on victims, individuals who have been involved with people with narcissism, and educating about narcissism, but really helping them with recovery.
Exactly. That's what's more important. Recovery of both the narcissist and the narcissistic partner or the child of the narcissist. And so I think we should bring it to a close here. And so just to let you know, in the next episode, we're going to be talking about intimate relationships with a narcissist. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation today. We look forward to joining with you and sharing this valuable information. Thank you.
Thank you.